If you would like to support this podcast, subscribing to the channel and sharing with others is a free way to do so. You can also leave feedback in the comments below or join my Discord. Disclaimer: this podcast is largely based on experience and opinion. Your own may differ. Please be respectful if you'd like to voice this. Also keep in mind this season was recorded in July and August of 2022. So information may be outdated or the guests may have differing opinions in the future. Hello everyone and welcome back to Say Chat Podcast, a podcast focused on short-form gaming discussions. I'm here with Chef, KAHMEENA, Holy AZURE, and Globe, our Season 1 panel again, to talk about meta and exclusivity. Do you guys want to say hi?
Yo, it's Chef.
What's up, it's KAHMEENA.
Holy AZURE here.
Hey, it's Globe.
Today we're going to be talking about meta and exclusivity, so I really hope you guys are ready. As you probably know, Guild Wars 2 is a game described by ArenaNet as play your own way, which has kind of caused some strife within the community, not just in within World versus World, but also for PvE and PvP. It's kind of a big debate in group content whether you should be allowed to play whatever you want and everyone should be included despite that, not just those running meta builds. There's even some that go as far as to say it's actually toxic to not allow people into your squads when they're running something that's off meta or not as good in group content or whatever you would like to call it, saying that exclusivity of some commanders is outright wrong because it encroaches on their right to play the way they want. It's a bit of a spicy subject, I have to say. We obviously aren't going to be covering the other game modes right now, so in terms of World versus World, let's start off from square one and get people acclimated with what it actually is we're talking about, what a meta is. So, Chef, for those that may not know, what is a meta?
Yeah, so meta is short for metagame, and the metagame is kind of the practices and habits and best strategies that evolve in any game that has a competitive element or a multiplayer element. I find it more useful, though, to think about meta as an anagram, where meta stands for the most effective tactics available. Meta is what you end up with when you assemble a group of classes that needs to perform as well as possible. So if you're familiar with Guild Wars PvE meta, that would be quickness and alacrity per party. It probably involves some kind of firebrand, and currently it's Mechanist because Mechanists have really high damage potential. World versus World meta is a little more complicated because in World versus World, you're fighting other players. You're not just fighting a static NPC that's the same week in and week out. So meta changes as other groups that play World versus World try new things and apply different strategies. And part of meta is keeping up with what other groups are doing to make sure that your tactics are the most effective against what everyone else is doing.
That's a really good summary. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, that was really good. I'm just gonna clip that and send it to people.
It a lot.
Yeah, I'm just gonna clip it and send it to people when they ask what a meta is now. And I think you should just make it a command on your stream.
Exclamation mark meta.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for the rest of you, I guess for Chef too, because we're moving on to the next question. Are you guys meta enforcers? Do you support the meta, or are you more of a believer that really there are it doesn't have to be meta? Meta is the best thing, but there's other things that are good too, and they should be allowed to be played. Are you strictly meta or are you not? Basically, let's start with Holy.
I'm a 50-50 type of commander, meet me halfway type of guy. I understand the meta. I've played with meta-only groups. I get it. At the same time, I also understand the point of view from, let's say a new player, for example, who doesn't even know what the meta is, just comes in on World v World, just wants to play the classes they like. I'm fine with having people play non-meta in my squad. Of course, I as the commander, as the leader of the squad, I choose when I want my squad to be meta strict only versus, oh, play whatever the heck you want. Let's just have some fun memes, PPT or whatever, or let's just do our best. Because at the end of the day, and I don't like saying it or admitting it, but it's the truth, and everybody has to accept it. It's like a hard to swallow pill. Meta beats meta, period. That's it.
Meta beats non-meta, you mean?
No, meta beats meta, and meta beats non-meta. That's what I was gonna say. Because a non-meta can't be a meta group. I mean, that's just. I mean, this topic can like spiral to like a bunch of different instances. Like,
Oh boy.
there are some cases where like a non-pug meta group can like by some miracle beat the meta group. It goes into a lot of things, really. I'll stop there for now because I could keep going on and on about this.
Okay, I know KAHMEENA has a lot to say about it, but I do want to get Globe's opinion first, because KAHMEENA, we did talk about this a little bit before. So I know.
A lot
I know.
to say on this subject.
Yeah, you have a lot to say. So we're going to go to Globe, and then we'll have you say something on your thoughts on this. And then we'll follow that up with Chef.
I heard the 50-50. I kind of guess I know where KAHMEENA is gonna go, so I'm gonna go on that different spectrum. I think meta is most important to the point where commanders can choose what they want to do, obviously. However, people should try meta to see if they like it. So I am the more kind of for meta person, I would call myself. That is because when it all comes to it, there are people who genuinely force out what the meta is. There were people who literally stood there with numbers and spreadsheets who were just like, hey, this works better. We're gonna use this to do this. And then it works. And then there's a person who just doesn't come, basically doesn't do anything, just like opens his build, hey, I'm just gonna take these and these traits with some random gear. And hey, like, that person hasn't put any effort in it, so obviously they're probably gonna lose.
That's fair. So you're saying people should try it before they knock it type thing.
Indeed.
Okay. All right, KAHMEENA, your turn.
Oh boy. Okay, so I'm gonna preface this by saying straight up that meta will always be a thing, no matter what game you play, no matter what mode you play, no matter what almost anything you play, if it's a competitive game. There are classes in Guild Wars 2 for World v World that are understandable 100% meta. Like, I don't want to go into too specific here, but like, you always need a firebrand. There is absolutely no way you can get past it. You have to play a firebrand. There has to be a firebrand somewhere, or you're gonna lose. There's nothing you can do about it until ANET decides to fix it, but that's just the case. But in a lot of cases, people conform to what they think the meta is, and I do not agree with that at all. You see these in things like other games like League of Legends or other MMOs where people, they come in, they look on websites, they see, oh, this is meta, and they just conform to this. Very few people actually theory craft and build things. And so I am the firm believer that while meta is important and meta is there, not everything is meta, because there's a reason how a build becomes meta in the first place. Because there's builds that people don't test or don't realize that are good, or sneak up on people. They don't realize it because not a lot of people do testing. And I am a theory crafter and a build crafter, so I go out of my way to find and test the things that are not meta, because there are builds that are underneath us right now that nobody knows that will probably be the next meta, but they are not calling it meta because they haven't tried it yet, because people are so stuck on this word of meta. that it's like the best of the best and nothing can beat it. When mathematically or not, most of the time, that's not true. So, yes, there are times when I do run meta, and there's times when I, do run all non-meta, essentially. But my big stance is meta is way more complicated than most people, or I should say, realize at all. And I think that there are a lot of builds and a lot of, especially elite specs, that you can play that are extremely good, but are not considered meta, and I believe they should be. I guess I'll end it at that. Because I could go on this topic for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. It's very meaty, and I wish we had more time for it. Maybe a whole season will be dedicated to meta in the future. We'll see. Chef, what are your thoughts on it, dude?
Yeah, I've got the middle ground for all it takes. I can put it together. And there's kind of two things that I'm thinking of. The first one is that AZURE said that meta beats meta and meta beats non-meta. And I do want to push back on this a little bit. The way that I see it anyway, there are two axes of performance in World versus World. You have good players and bad players, and everyone is somewhere on that spectrum. And then you have meta and non-meta, and everyone is somewhere on that spectrum. If you're playing a class in World versus World, you are either meta or not meta, and you're somewhat skilled. And the way that those axes break down is that good players beat bad players, and meta beats non-meta. But there's an interaction, right? You could be a bad player playing a meta build, or you could be a good player trying something off meta. And that's going to make it a little more unclear what actually wins out in the end. And I think that dynamic of the interaction between skill and whether you're playing a meta class or not is really interesting. Because the assumption would be that most good groups are going to be good players and meta classes. So that's going to make them the hardest to beat. A random pug group is usually going to be lower skill and not meta. So that's going to make them easy to beat. And on any given matchup in World versus World, you're finding all of these groups that are at different places along that curve. They have different levels of skill, they have different levels of meta, and I think that's one of the things that makes World versus World interesting as a game mode to play. But then the second point, kind of responding to what KAHMEENA said, is that I think there can sometimes be a prevailing wisdom about meta that because you can look the build up in a spreadsheet, that there wasn't like a depth of understanding that went into producing it. So a little bit of how the sausage is made. In the Knights of the Temple Discord, the guild that I will command for off and on, we have a pinned post in our theory crafting channel. And the pinned post in that theory crafting channel is a breakdown of the base health and coefficient values for every skill for every class in the game. And it's a document that guides our thinking about what builds are good and what builds might be meta and what we should be running in our comp. There is an immense amount of work that goes into deciding whether a build is meta or not. And there's an immense amount of work that goes into finding the classes that are the most powerful from a balance perspective or from a perspective of being able to do unique and powerful things in the game mode that I think can go underappreciated by people who think that meta is one person who put a build in like a document and said, play this. So I guess the long answer is that I kind of see myself somewhere in the middle, where a meta build isn't meta because someone decided it was meta. A meta build is meta because it survived exhaustive testing against multiple other viable options, and that meta build is the one that ended up coming out on top. But KAHMEENA is also right in that there are cases in World versus World where people have totally missed a build that winds up being really good. And the most recent one that I can think of is the Minion Reaper build that was nerfed about, 5-6 months ago in one of the balance patches. That was a build where all the tools had always been there, and it took people a very long time to notice that it was actually viable and very powerful within the context of the World versus World meta, to the point where other groups would actually start to adapt their own tactics in order to counter the fact that people were playing Minion Reaper. And that was one of the factors that led to it being nerfed, is in the GVG community, people would straight up refuse to play in GVGs that used Minion Reaper as a build.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love using that argument. That's my favorite one to use.
Yeah, the Rise build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. I can take a stance and agree with you there. Like I understand that there are builds like I said, like Firebrand, right? Like I think every single person here can agree that there is no replacing Firebrand as of this moment of this podcast. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it said like they're gonna try to fix it in the future, but since Path of Fire came out, there has been absolutely nothing that can replace Firebrand.
It was
Like
before
this,
Path of Fire.
Oh, was it before Path of Fire?
Stand Your Ground is not a Firebrand ability; it's a base guard ability.
That's true. Yeah, especially once Firebrand came out in Path of Fire, there was no competition. It's not even a close competition. You absolutely needed to survive, and that makes total sense. Stab is one of the most important skills in World v. World ever. It's essentially one of the most important. I should say not skills, boons. And so like you need that. There's no question, but
yeah, I actually want to jump on that quick because I think people might be going, well, why is Firebrand so important? Like, who cares about Stab? That's the ability that lets me ignore mechanics in PvE. World versus World revolves around being able to control your character. The more effectively that you can move and the more effectively that you can cast your own skills, the more damage you're going to put out. And that makes 3 boons in particular have an outsized impact on World versus World. And those boons are stability, so that you don't get, feared, punted, knocked back. They are Aegis, so that you can block incoming attacks, especially things like pulls. And they are resistance, so that you can avoid non-damaging immobilization CC effects. Those 3 boons are far more important than any other boon in the context of the World versus World meta. And as a result, classes that are able to provide those boons effectively have an outsized representation in the World versus World meta itself. Because if we didn't have stability and we didn't have Aegis, the game mode would be less fun to play. You would have very little control over your character, and you would be constantly punted and knocked back. And you don't have to spend a lot of time in World versus World running without Stab and without a squad to see how it's just an overall unfun experience.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the difference right away when you don't have a Firebrand in your party versus when you do, and it's like it's definitely night and day, and it's like you have to be self-sufficient at that point if you don't have a Firebrand, because if you don't have Stab or your own source of Stab, it's like you can't play. You can't even play, especially in large groups where you're engaging on other squads, because you get knocked around, you get rooted in spot right away, and then you're dead because you can't do anything. You can't cast your skills and stuff like that. Before we go on with the conversation, Holy, you wanted to say something in there?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, regarding what I said before, meta beats meta, that was talking about, when I know there's like another fight guild in the map, and I know they're all running meta, and I know my squad's not running meta, of course, the only solution for me then as a commander is, I need to make sure my squad is running meta. That's really why I only say that. So I guess what I really meant to say, just to clarify, is there's a time and place for when you should be running meta. I think the main message I want to let listeners know is don't be, I guess, so hard on yourself if you're not running meta, or you don't have the right gear, the right stats, whatever, or the right class. It's okay, I think everybody started off somewhere. And then going beyond that, what I also wanted to talk about was, it's funny because all the meta builds are posted publicly on several different websites. It's kind of easy or challenging, I guess, for somebody to go up to those websites, get the meta build, and then try to theory craft a counter meta build. Like, they'll take the meta build, they'll look at it from the website and be like, what can I do? What can I create that'll counter this build? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do that literally every single day, almost on stream. I play a new build. And I love to theory craft, and I love to come up with things. There's some things that fail because things look better on paper. Like, there's a lot of things that, like, builds that I've tested that, like, on paper, mathematically, it's, wow, this would be absolutely amazing. holy hell, this is incredible. And then in practice, it's not as good because of other circumstances or the, what classes are primarily dominant right now. Especially
Yeah.
as the ebb and flow of WvW, because like right now we're in a power meta. Before we used to be in Condi. It's
Yep.
consistently shifting over and over and over again. So some things will be better and some things will be worse because of the meta that you're in at the moment, of whatever's primarily dominant.
And the thing about Firebrand that I also want to bring up is, I kind of hate to say this, but at the end of the day, it's ain't its fault, I guess. I mean, because
Oh, it's 200% ain't its fault, right?
So-
Like, it's 200% ain't its fault.
So currently it's like what, end of August, August 20th right now. A few days ago they tried to nerf Firebrand. They removed one of the elite they removed a charge of the elite mantra stab, and then they decided to unnerf it because of feedback. So, I'm a Firebrand main, right? I like playing Firebrand. And that's another thing we gotta talk about really is like forcing people to play meta. People talk about Firebrand jail or Scrapper jail. Like, I guess some people don't mind it. Some people do mind it. Me, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. The point, at the end of the day, it's very important to highlight this. When you're playing World v. World, you need to have fun. Whether that's playing meta, whether that's playing whatever you want, as long as you're having fun. But anyways, back to Firebrand. Personally, for me, as a Firebrand main, I was kind of excited when I saw the thing that they said, oh, we're nerfing Firebrand. I was like, oh, thank God, finally. I was like, Jesus, it took them forever. Because what everyone's saying right now is correct. Firebrand is too, it's unreplaceable. So then my mind starts thinking about like, okay, what are the other options? Like, there are other classes that do provide group stability. Like, I think Druid does it
Yeah,
really
Druid-
badly.
Yeah, it's
Druid
just
does
very,
it
very
really
little.
badly.
That's the
Mesmer
problem.
does it
Yeah.
really badly.
Yeah, I get it. So here's I guess here's, even though it's ain't its fault at the end of the day, I guess from their point of view, from their aspect, is they are coming across a challenge where I guess their philosophy is kind of like, their in-game development philosophy is kind of like crashing together. Like, it's like hypocritical kind of. Like, they want to make every class, every elite spec like individual, unique, special, different, but at the same time they have to like balance every class. So in this case, for overall, when we're talking about Firebrand, we're talking about stability and stun break. In this case, they have to figure out a way to give every class stun break and stability. And it makes me wonder, for the World v. World community, would people be okay with that? Would people be happy if every class got a stability and a stun break? Like,
No, but that's also not what their design philosophy is. Their design philosophy, hopefully going forward in World versus World, all the way. Oh, by the way, we might have to cut this whole aside because it's like, Firebrand episode rather than meta episode. But their whole design philosophy around how they want stab to work and how they want ages to work is actually giving 2 to 3 classes of source. And I think that's a healthy point for the meta to be in. I think one of the things we talked about in one of the earlier episodes is how boon corruption and boon strip is actually in a really healthy place in the meta, where there's about 4 classes that can do it, and each class that does it brings something unique to the table. If they could design stability around that, and they could design damage around that, and they could design like stealth and blasts and other utility around that, I think it would be a really healthy place, where it's not necessarily that you have every class can do X and then there's no feeling of uniqueness anymore, but to have more than one class be able to do it. So that if you're coming into World versus World and you're, a thief main or like a ranger main, that there are actually 1 or 2 roles that you can fill, rather than just being like, oh, guess what? Nobody plays your class in a group that's over like 10 people.
I mean,
Because that's a big feels bad for someone who's just starting World versus World.
I mean,
like,
I
I
will
leveled my
say-
Ranger 1 to 80. I love my Ranger. My pet is really cool. And then you get to World versus World, and you're like, your pet doesn't get stealth, so you need to put that away. And also, nobody uses your class except for roaming.
except mobile arrow cards are literally one of the God's gifted creations, and you can't change my mind otherwise.
Yeah, So, but I like quietly said at the start, we don't want to get too into the weeds on like specific class meta. We want to stay more general. So we
No,
should
so
probably...
I want to say this too quickly before we like either move on or continue. That ANET did strictly say that they want to. The reason they backpedaled on this nerf is because of the, you know, the backlash from it. Because I originally was like, yes, I want more personal responsibility in World v World. I don't want to rely 100% on my firebrand to give me the stability that I need to live. Like I want it to be more, but Dana did strictly say that they want to, you know, add more sources of stab reliably to other classes before they nerf Firebrand or
Yep.
while they nerf Firebrand. So if you're listening to this in the future and this already happened and you're like, what is happening? Just know that this has been going on since, like I said, Path of Fire, even before Path of Fire, kind of since like the game's start. Guardian was considered king in this type of thing. So just know that, for a disclaimer, that they are working on it. We'll see what happens. We'll probably talk about it in another episode whenever it actually drops, but they are working on it, which is good to hear. It's finally good to hear communication involved like this.
Yeah, as long as we get that balance where there's multiple sources, just like I think Chef said it would be good, because then the meta could constantly be shifting depending on the player and the community, and that's exactly what we want and need in World versus World.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna move on now because I don't want to dive more into that. I'll keep that stuff in probably, but so
But I think it's good to keep in some.
yeah, given your guys' opinions where you're kind of middle ground on meta, it depends on the player and stuff like that. There are some squads, closed groups, or open tags. I've been in some open tag situations where they want you to play meta, and if you're not playing meta, they don't take you. Like, if you're playing Thief, they won't take you in their squad. If you're playing Ranger, generally they won't take you in the squad, right? Because they're very independent classes. They don't do much for group play and stuff like that. And in PvE, right now you see it a lot where if you're not playing, well, I guess not right now anymore because everything's shifting and changing because of EUD, but before, when people would try to play something that was off meta, it would generally be seen as, why are you playing this? You're throwing, by some people, and it made them not want to include the people who do want to play off meta. So they would lash out at the people who were playing off meta, and it was kind of like this toxic like loop, right? For World versus World specifically, it kind of bled over, and if you're not playing meta, you're not included in squads. Do you guys see that as toxic? Do you agree with that type of mentality? Like, if you're not playing meta, if you're not playing the comp we want, I'm not going to include you in the squad? Or do you guys think it's, honestly, it's okay because it's your squad. If you want to play with a meta group, it's okay to just ask people to not, or tell people, we're playing this way. You can't force the way you're playing on us, type thing. Like, what's your guys' opinions on that? And the exclusivity that's kind of evolving right now.
It's a complicated dynamic. I mean, I think what you said at the start of the episode, where Guild Wars is a game about being able to play your own way, is 100% right. And I think a lot of times to invent a strawman pug player who just wants to get into a squad, the temptation is, well, I should be able to play the way I want. I don't get why this commander is excluding me. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is that that commander and everyone else in that squad are also interested in playing the way that they want. And the way that they want to play is the meta. They want to have stab so that they can use their class abilities. They want to have Condi Cleanse so that they don't sit in an immob for 4 seconds and fall behind their group. And it tends to be easier. This isn't always true, but it tends to be easier for an individual player who wants to play the way they want, to find a different tag than to try to get into whatever group they see that might not be playing with the same goals that they have. So I'm of the camp that it is not toxic to ask people to play meta classes. If you're interested in doing something that is not meta, you can find another group, you can tag up yourself, you can construct a community or a small group of players that has the same goals that you do. But I don't think that we should be in a situation where we need to enforce the way that we play on other people. When I'm running a squad, when we're tagged closed for KNT or hate or something like that, occasionally I will have to ask people to swap guard or swap NG. But I'm not telling people that they need to be on a meta class or they can't get in the squad, because the expectation in that closed squad is that that's how you play. That's the community that we've cultivated.
Yeah, that's fair. I fall into the same line in that way, that I think that if the commander and the commander's core group want to play a specific way, you shouldn't be able to force your way in if you're not playing the style that they're playing just because you want to play your own way. There's plenty of other resources out there for you to also play the way you want and let them play the way they want. I can see where people can get kind of salty, especially if there's only one tag on the map, right? And they want to follow a tag, or they only know how to follow a tag because they're new and they're not allowed in because they're not playing meta or whatever. But it is a very thin line. I'm interested to know what the others think. Globe, do you have any opinions on this? Are you of the same mind, or do you think a little bit differently? Do you think it's toxic?
In fact, I think it's less toxic than people actually think, because the commander in the game is the person who genuinely owns their squad, isn't it? So when the player joins their commander squad, they are basically in an agreement. Hey, I'm gonna follow this guy. I will do as he says. If they join the squad and then they go, hey, I'm gonna join this guy just for the sake of it, and then not do anything his way, then what does that say about the person?
It's true. It's true. Holy and KAHMEENA, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
So I'm in an interesting spot because, okay, I think that for example, I'll start with this: closed squads. It's not toxic. The whole point of a closed squad is your group of people, however many people is in this closed squad, are committed to doing something and working together to basically solve a puzzle, whatever that puzzle is. If you don't want people to join your closed squad, 100%, it's your squad. I do understand from the previous topic we just talked about. I understand that there's a lot of people who play builds, and for example, mobile hour cart rangers. I know a lot of people who don't really either like that build or don't even accept rangers or don't care about rangers. They don't like seeing a ranger, and I think that's ridiculous personally. On from my own testing and things, but, and here's the big but. At the end of the day, what Globe said is 200% correct. It's not even a thing. You show up and join as a commander, and you need to listen to commanders to succeed. If you're out doing your own thing and you're playing your own builds, why are you joining them? Why are you what is the point? Now I can understand also at the same time that if there's only one commander going on, then that sucks. But you know what you do? You do what I did, and you start up your own. You start being a commander yourself. Right? Do the things that you want. Don't force yourself to sit there and go, oh, I don't want to join this. Yes, I do think that there's sometimes that people do push it to ridiculous levels. Oh, I see a thief. I don't want to see a thief in here when I'm but Spectre and Deadeye are interesting. And I think of it very differently. I'm thinking of it puzzle pieces kind of ordeal. But no, I don't think it's toxic at all. I really don't. I mean, there's people who push it to a level where people are in map chat and they're you're ridiculous for I'm not accepting anybody who is a thief or a ranger. in my squad and go out of their way to make it toxic, but inherently going, I don't want you to play this because we need, better things. I don't think that's necessarily toxic at all.
Okay. So it seems like everyone's of the same opinion. Holy, what are your thoughts on this?
I think toxicity comes from an individual person. It's not like saying that, oh, this player says you can't join my squad unless you're running meta is toxic. I don't think that's toxic, but there are cases I have seen where the person that's like trying to communicate that message says it in like a very toxic way. So that's why, from my opinion, the toxicity stems from the person itself. There's a nice way to say it, and then there's like a toxic way to say it. That's pretty much it. That's how I see it.
So it's more about the mannerisms of how people say it than it is about the actual concept of closed squads or non-meta people joining into meta wanting groups, is what you're saying.
I mean, like I said, there's a time for I said this before. There's literally a time for everything. Fight guilds show up with a fully comped, disciplined squad. They're all running meta. Then that will trigger an effect where the enemy team will also start generating or forming up a similar squad, a meta squad. During the off hours, when there isn't like any quote unquote content going on, or like another like a meta squad running around like an enemy meta squad, and then of course people play wherever they want. I see it all the time because I know the guild tags of the fight guilds for WoW World. I see them playing ranger and thieves off times, when there is no enemy Zerg running around. But when there is an enemy Zerg, yeah, damn right, they're changing back to their meta class. In retrospect to a new player coming into World versus World, don't take it as toxicity or elitism, I guess. It's just we're I feel like at the end of the day, for a new player, it really comes down to what their goal is. Like, do you want to have fun? Do you want to kill a lot of people? Are you just getting your weekly chest? Whatever. That will dictate how you want to play meta, non-meta. Do you want to join a squad? Do you care? Why don't you want to join a squad? I've played with people. This is actually a real experience. I once played with I was tagged up an ABG SMC. Some guy joined. He was like a meta player. He was playing meta. Nothing wrong with that. And then we died. I think we kept dying. He got upset and left the squad. So I mean, I guess he wasn't having fun or whatever. He was tired of losing. But I can't say like, I'm not gonna blame anybody. I'm not gonna blame like a single person or a group of individual people that are not running meta, because it's just a game. We're just here to have fun. That's kind of where I stand on the whole, is running meta toxic or not? Not
Just
really.
a quick note on something that you said, Azure, because I want to make sure that people listening to this don't think that meta is something that only closed squads use. Meta is a way of approaching gameplay. And
Yeah.
the reason that you see people with those fight guild tags playing Rangers and Thieves in the off hours is because Rangers and Thieves in off hours, when there's not organized content, is meta. They're very strong solo classes. They're not very strong group classes. And because these meta guilds are more likely to be taking a calculated, organized approach to gameplay and figuring out what the most effective class is for any situation, not just for an organized tag. That's why you see them also playing like solo meta classes and group meta classes, is because they're trying to use the most effective tactics that they have available for the gameplay that they're pursuing. And I know that this is a World versus World podcast and not a PvE Guild Wars podcast, but there's definitely meta in PvE too, in terms of the most effective tactics you have for a strike mission. You might even change your meta depending on whether you're doing like CM or non-CM, or even like a Harvest Temple strike versus an Aetherblade strike, where heavy CC is meta for Aetherblade, it's not meta for Junkyard. So it describes an approach to gameplay. It doesn't describe a particular kind of gameplay, it describes a mentality. And that's what makes it the metagame rather than just the game.
I
No,
think
you're
what,
Go ahead.
sorry, I think what will make it easy for all of our viewers to understand is meta is the way to win.
Yeah.
Because there is always the best way to win at something is to use this class and this tactic, let's say.
No, yeah, that's correct.
mean-
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I kind of disagree on that. Like, I understand what you're trying to say, but the way that you're generalizing it is a bad way to generalize it, I think. Like, I get what you're saying here, and like, you're not wrong, but from the literally just the previous discussion we had, it's like, it's not 100% accurate. Like, meta is really good, and meta is perceived as the best, but it's not end all be all. What you want to say here is, like, depending on the type of player you are, you can strive. Like, for example, what Chef said, like, he thinks that, like, oh yeah, these people are going on off hours of non like essentially reset hours to go and play Thief and Ranger because they're meta choices. When that's not necessarily 100% true. They could just be playing Thief and Ranger because they want to play Thief and Ranger.
Oh, I
But-
promise you, these are friends of mine who are playing Thief and Ranger. They're playing Thief and Ranger because Thief and Ranger are good for solo content.
I mean, I guarantee you that's 100% you're not wrong. But to say that every single person is doing that, to say that every single person in every single fight guild is on off hours is playing those classes because of their meta at that time, I don't agree with you at that.
Sorry, KAHMEENA, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm actually going to cut this conversation off because we're way past the time limit right now. And I know that this could go so far and so long. I'm just going to sum it up to, you need to, with the whole tagline for Guild Wars 2, play your own way, you need to understand that playing your own way, there's also other people involved in group content, right? So you have to also cater to the way they want to play, and you need to find people that have like mindsets, people who want to play meta, because as Chef said, that is basically a mindset for some people. They want to play what's optimized during that specific set of environmental interactions. If it's off hours, they play something that's good, that's more solo and can be independent. If it's like peak hours, they play more group content because they're with more people, so they want to contribute to the group more. And I'm just going to leave it at that. People need to remember more how they're communicating what they want and making sure that they're not using toxic means of communication, because it's not the actual act that seems to be the issue, it's the way people are communicating it. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna try, hopefully that's a good way to sum it up. Does that sound, I assume it sounds like it summed it up fine. I know, I'm sorry for cutting that off, but I know that could have gone for like another hour.
I mean, this entire discussion, we can go back and forth. Like,
Yeah.
I want to, honestly.
All
I
of
would
these
love
are.
to sit here and literally, like, debate this, because, like, I have very strong opinions on these things because I think differently compared to most. And I'm told that by so many people. Like, I think of things as like almost like a puzzle piece, and you got to figure out the puzzle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
But I
there are
really like
multiple
what
ways
you
of doing
said. I really like what you said quietly about how sometimes you got to meet people in the middle. Like,
You have
look,
to.
at the end of the day, you're playing an MMO. I'll let you figure out what one of those M's stands for.
Yeah,
And,
I
like,
agree.
I know it's your $15 a month that you spend on the gem store, but like, you're playing with other people, and you got to find some ways to compromise so that everyone in the game environment can have a bit of fun.
Yeah.
You got to build friends, right? Like you got to find people that, like, for example, we may have differences of opinions, but like I play with Holy, I played with Chef, and I played with Global, and we all work well together. It's not like just because I have my difference in views to them, and it's not wildly different. There's just some things where we break apart, but we work really well together.
That actually is going to fall really well into community attitudes, which we're going to be doing soon. So I'm going to just, snip this episode right now and
By
say
the way,
we're
really,
done. After Globe.
Okay.
One more thing, Globe. It's okay.
really quickly, I want to say I was putting up an act as to be the other kind of spectrum.
I mean, I like it. I liked it. I like the differences of opinion. It makes things more interesting to talk about.
It makes drama.
Well, maybe not.
Drama.
Maybe not drama, but it's definitely.
Don't remind me of PvP again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Before we keep
Wait,
going, I really need to cut this off, guys.
Oh.
Do you want to say?
Honestly, I thought you did cut it off already.
No.
so...
Okay, so if you're listening on YouTube, I would love to know your guys' thoughts in the comments. We talked about some pretty interesting things. And honestly, I would really like to know the opinions of someone who actually thinks it's toxic to not let other people in, or to not let non-meta into squads. I want to know your guys' opinions specifically, because I've always been of the opinion that it's not toxic, and it seems like from a commander's point of view, it's not toxic, but we're not everyday players, we're commanders. So we might be a little bit biased. Yeah, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support, please like and subscribe. We'll be back next episode where we kind of talk about what goes on in the head of a commander when they're commanding.